A coin can look eternal. It can carry the face of an emperor, the eagle of Rome, the promise of stability. But peel back the surface, and value can vanish. Rome discovered that money can die while still jingling in your hand. For centuries, Rome's money was trusted across the known world. A silver denarius could pay a soldier, buy a bushel of grain, or cross a sea in a merchant's hand. It was confidence stamped into metal, but confidence is fragile. Under Augustus, the denarius was 95% silver. By the mid-3rd century, it was less than 5%. To the eye, the coin looked the same, but inside, its value had been hollowed out. This was not just debasement, it was betrayal. People woke up to discover that their savings bought less every year. Their wages stretched thinner, and the coin in their palm was little more than bronze with a silver wash. And history repeats. For most of the 20th century, the US dollar was tied to gold. That ended in 1971 when President Richard Nixon closed the gold window. From that moment, the dollar was no longer backed by metal, but only by trust. And just like Rome's denarius, it looked the same on the surface, but its anchor was gone. Since then, the dollar has lost more than 85% of its purchasing power. What $1 bought in 1971 now costs more than $7. In 1970, a home in the United States cost around $23,000. Today, it is closer to $400,000. The wood, the bricks, the roof have not changed, but the money beneath them has. Rome's story is not just about empire. It is about money that looks real long after it has died. The strength of Rome was not only in its legions, it was in a coin small enough to fit in a pocket and strong enough to command trust across continents. The silver denarius, first minted in 211 BC, the denarius was nearly pure silver. Stamped with the emperor's profile, it was portable, durable, and recognized everywhere from Britain to Syria. Soldiers demanded it, farmers accepted it, merchants carried it across seas, and families saved it for generations. The denarius was more than money. It was trust in metal form, and that trust powered an empire. Today, the world runs on a different coin of confidence, the US dollar. It underpins most global reserves, anchors nearly 90% of currency trades, and dominates trade in oil and commodities. Like the denarius, the dollar is more than paper and ink. It is a promise that tomorrow it will still have value. But Rome's story warns us, when the metal or the promise behind money fades, confidence follows. Empires are expensive. They eat money every single day. Rome's wealth poured into legions on the frontiers, fleets on the seas, aqueducts for cities, and grain shipments to keep the population fed. Every conquest added territory, but every territory added another payroll. By the 2nd century AD, Rome's borders stretched thousands of miles. Defending that sprawl meant paying for hundreds of thousands of soldiers, building roads that cut across continents, and sustaining restless provinces. Taxes poured in, but it was never enough. Raise taxes too high, and revolt spread. Cut spending, and enemies pushed harder on the borders. Rome was trapped in an impossible equation, too big to shrink, too fragile to expand. And like governments today, emperors search for a shortcut. In 2024, the United States spent nearly $1 trillion on defense, more than the next 9 nations combined. But even that was rivaled by something far less visible, close to $1 trillion in interest payments on its national debt. Money that bought no new roads, no new armies, no new innovation, just the price of past borrowing. Rome turned to debasement. Modern nations turned to borrowing and printing. Different methods, same motive, stretch resources beyond reality. When emperors needed cash, they avoided the obvious choices. Raising taxes risked revolt. Cutting the army risked invasion. So they turned to the mint. At first, the change was small. A little less silver, a little more copper. The emperor's face was still there. The Latin words were still there. But the weight told the truth, and the shine began to fade. Ordinary people noticed. A shopkeeper saw the color dull. A soldier bit a coin and felt it bend. Families compared coins and found the new ones lighter. Confidence cracked. Merchants raised prices. Farmers demanded barter. Soldiers wanted higher pay. Families hid away the old silver and passed off only the new bronze. Bad money drove out good. This was the true danger of debasement. It didn't just hollow out Rome's money, it hollowed out its trust. And here is the modern echo. Between 2008 and 2022, the United States created nearly $8 trillion in new money. Not mined, not earned, but typed into existence. The bills looked the same, but their power stretched thinner with each keystroke. Rome's coins lost silver. Today, money loses purchasing power. Different tools, same trick. Rome entered the 3rd century like a giant running out of breath. Enemies pressed the borders, civil wars tore through provinces, emperors rose and fell at dizzying speed. 26 rulers in just 50 years, most of them assassinated. But behind the battles was a quieter collapse, money that no longer worked. Farmers abandoned their fields because taxes were demanded in coins that could not buy seed. Markets slipped back into barter. Merchants hoarded silver in secret. Soldiers muttered that their pay had become worthless. The spiral deepened. More coins were struck with less silver. Prices climbed higher. Soldiers demanded more pay. The treasury minted more coins still. Trust kept falling. This pattern has echoed through history. In Weimar Germany, after the First World War, a loaf of bread soared from 250 marks to 200 billion marks. Families rushed to spend wages the moment they were paid, because waiting even a day meant higher prices. In Argentina, the story is unfolding right now. Inflation surged past 200% in 2023, and the peso became so broken that the government abandoned it altogether, dollarizing the economy. And in Lebanon, the currency collapsed by more than 90% between 2019 and 2024. Salaries lost their meaning, and workers walked off their jobs because their pay could no longer feed their families. The lesson is always the same. When money fails, society fractures. Rome's 3rd century crisis was not just about enemies at the gates. It was about money that had already rotted within. By the year 301, Rome's economy was in open crisis. Inflation was devouring wages. Markets no longer obeyed the state's coins. Trust had collapsed. The Emperor Diocletian tried to stop the bleeding with a single stroke of law. He issued the edict on maximum prices, fixing the cost of more than 1,000 goods and services. The punishment for charging more was severe, in some cases, even death. Diocletian believed that if he could not restore the value of money, he could at least force people to pretend it was still there. But no decree can make false money true. Farmers refused to bring grain to market at the official price. Merchants pulled goods from stalls rather than trade at a loss. Shoppers turned to back alleys where real prices could be agreed upon. The black market flourished because it dealt in the only thing left that mattered: trust between two people. Rome learned what Venezuela discovered in the 21st century. When governments fix prices while currency collapses, shelves empty, markets vanish, and people survive outside the law. You cannot legislate value back into broken money. When Diocletian's controls failed, Rome needed more than laws. It needed new money. That answer came with Constantine the Great. Around the year 312, he introduced the solidus, a gold coin struck to a consistent standard, nearly pure and impossible to fake. The solidus restored confidence, especially in the East. Contracts were written in it, taxes were collected in it, merchants sailed for it. Kings accepted it. For more than 7 centuries, the solidus became the backbone of Byzantine trade and diplomacy, one of the most stable currencies in history. But in the West, the damage ran deeper. A strong coin could not rebuild trust that had already been broken. People had learned to hoard what was real and pass on what was not. Farmers who had fled their land did not return to plant. Merchants who had turned to barter did not suddenly embrace the state's money again. Money is not only metal or paper, it is memory, and Rome's memory was scarred. The same pattern plays out in modern times. When trust collapses, governments often attempt a reset. Argentina dollarized its economy in 2024. Zimbabwe abandoned its own currency after hyperinflation, turning instead to foreign money. Even in the United States, the end of the gold standard was a kind of reset, an admission that the old system no longer held. Rome's solidus worked for centuries in the East, but the West had already unraveled. Trust, once lost, does not return quickly. That is the danger of broken money. Coins can be reminted, bills redesigned, but confidence leaves a scar no decree can erase. Rome's story of money is not just about coins turning to dust. It is about the slow erosion of trust, the quiet unraveling of cooperation, and the way societies fracture when money no longer holds its promise. When coins lost their silver, contracts lost their weight. Farmers abandoned their fields. Merchants turned to barter, and soldiers no longer trusted their pay. The fall of Rome was not a single night of fire and invasion. It was a long fading of belief in the very system that held the empire together. And this is why Rome's lesson matters now. We live in a world where money still looks solid on the surface. Dollars, euros, pesos, pounds, the paper and the coins all appear unchanged. But beneath them, the anchor is gone. Since 1971, the dollar has floated without gold. Central banks expand money with keystrokes. Governments pile up debts with no clear plan to repay them. Prices rise, wages strain to keep pace, and families quietly adjust their lives in ways that feel eerily familiar. The echoes are unmistakable. In Argentina, inflation has already forced the government to abandon its own peso. In Lebanon, salaries lost their meaning as the currency collapsed. Even in strong economies, housing, food, and savings are quietly shifting beneath people's feet. Just as Romans once hoarded silver and rejected debased coins, modern families search for safety in anything they believe will still hold value tomorrow. So, what do we take from Rome's story? Not simple answers, but hard questions. If governments continue to stretch money beyond its foundation, what happens when people stop believing in the promise behind it? If wars and commitments are funded not by resources, but by printing, how long can trust endure? If money itself fractures, what else unravels? Contracts, trade, even the cooperation that makes everyday life possible? Rome reminds us that money is not just currency, it is confidence. And once that confidence breaks, no empire, ancient or modern, can stand for long. The coin may still shine in the hand, but the trust inside is already gone. Rome's coins didn't just lose silver, they lost trust. And once trust died, the empire began to unravel. But Rome wasn't the last. Centuries later, another empire believed prosperity could be built on credit, speculation, and endless growth. In 1929, Wall Street was the beating heart of the modern world, and in a single crash, it nearly stopped.